this is one of those things that just takes up volumes. It takes up so much space because it needs the space to be able to be processed and told and heard and shared. And so Father, just show us what help us walk in wisdom as how to walk with one another.
Holy Wild Birth is a podcast embracing the reclamation of giving birth, rooted in God's original design, undisturbed.
Here, we share home birth stories highlighting God's presence as the great midwife, as well as conversations about all aspects of a holistic, spirit-led childbearing year. From the perspectives of myself, traditional midwife Lauren Hall of Rooted in Eden Private Contract Association,
and me, holistic doula and birthkeeper Brooke Collier of Sister Birth.
To choose a holy wild birth journey is to consecrate all your decisions unto the Lord.
And to reclaim creation unadulterated by centuries of human attempts to control and improve upon what God has already called good.
Please remember, birth is not a medical event, but a natural process. We are not your care providers, and this should not be taken as medical advice. Welcome to another episode of Holy Wild Birth. Today, we are making space for a topic that is difficult, but all too often goes unshared. That is pregnancy loss. You are getting to listen in on about half of a Believing Birth Keepers Circle call, where we sat together and shared our personal stories of early and late pregnancy loss, meaning first and second trimester. We do not discuss stillbirth in this episode. Our hope is that in listening to other stories, lost moms will find the freedom to share their stories and perhaps feel seen and ultimately known by our Heavenly Father, as well as the grace to grieve well and ability to hold an eternal perspective, because for us in Christ Jesus, death has lost its sting. All right. Hello, ladies. I'm so excited to discuss this evening's topic. Even though it's a hard and weighty topic, I always find joy sitting in circle with you all. So, but I want to start off with prayer. Lord, we just thank you. Thank you for this beautiful group of women and this time of fellowship that ultimately honors you. And I just ask that today, anything that is shared, that as we maybe even open up old wounds, and as we encourage each other to keep our eyes upon you, even in hard and tragic circumstances, that we would be uplifted, that we would be encouraged, that we would be comforted. God, your word says to mourn with those who mourn and rejoice with those who rejoice. And so I ask that today we were able to come together and grieve well with one another, and be able to keep our eyes on the fact that it's eternal, that these beings, that these precious children, that though we had them for a short time, they are eternal beings and they are with you. And we have the glorious hope that death has no sting, and we will one day be reunited with our precious children. And I ask that all the things said here today would be held with just the sacred holiness of what it is to look at life and death, and that it would also be a support for outside listeners as they get to have this glimpse into this beautiful community we have. And we just thank you for it in Jesus' name. Amen.
So how to start?
Yeah.
I'll start with this. I think so our first baby was a miscarriage at 11 weeks. So that was my first experience of pregnancy. And the thing that surprised me the most, possibly, was how, after that happened, how many women came to me and said, me too. Me too. And that's when I realized I had joined this club that was really big, and how very common it is to experience a loss, and also how quiet we are about it.
Yeah.
And I guess that's one thing I feel excited about and diving into this together is like I just breaking that silence of like feeling like it's something we're not allowed to bring up, or it's the always the awkward thing in the back of your mind when somebody asks you how many children do you have, right? Like, well, how do you want me to answer that? So I even know within the circle there's some of that me too, right? Like I also have gone through that. And so yeah, I just wanted to make some space to share those stories or reflections on those stories, I guess. If it helps for me to go first, I'm happy to, but otherwise I'm also very happy to listen.
Yeah, I remember I also lost my first pregnancy was a early miscarriage. I have two in my history of birthing, and both of them, my first one was very much a shock to my system. It was so early that I had just found out that I was pregnant, and then I lost very quickly. And I remember actually waking up, and I was just started. It was like I woke up from a sob. It was like my body knew before I did,
Wow.
and just woke up sobbing, and just knew something was off. And I went to the bathroom, and everything, baby and everything else had all come out. And so I'd only held this baby for knowingly for about a week. I was about 4.5, 5 weeks along when I first lost our oldest, or my oldest. And I just remember having just being very much in shock. This was actually an out of wedlock pregnancy with my, at the time, my fiance. And he had just gone back to Afghanistan. And I had, stepped into that. And I remember for a while, I thought that that was like somewhat of a punishment, kind of walking through that whole lie. And, and it was my first husband. We got back from war. We did get married, but that, he didn't even know we were pregnant at the time. So he found out the day, like the next time I got to speak to him was like 2 or 3 weeks post the miscarriage. And so I told him about the baby and then about the loss all in the same moment, which felt really hard and heavy, kind of walking through it all by myself, it felt like, along with the like shame that I was ever pregnant and just all the things. But I just also remember the Lord being so I had just come back to the Lord. It was very, very fresh, of returning to him. And I just remember his presence being so sweet and so near, and really being able to just like process that loss. I was it was a January morning, and in the South, I always like kind of laugh because I had never really seen it. I grew up in the South. I don't know snow. Like snow is not a thing that was very much in my life at all. And so I had never actually, I was 21, and I had never seen a snowflake like in real life. I did not understand that what we cut out as paper, like snowflake designs, was actually like a thing. Like every snowflake, quote unquote, I had ever seen in my life, and there's a point to this, was these like flakes, these chips of snow. They were like ice flecks, really, because that's all we got. We just got ice that fell from the sky and then hit the ground and melted because the ground was too hot. And so is the day that I lost this precious baby, and I'm sitting in a hot tub just kind of mourning and really in shock. And it started snowing, and I had my hands kind of like, just palm up. And this snowflake, like an actual real snowflake, hit my palm, and I saw just this beautiful, intricate design. And I was like, oh, that's real. That's like, I didn't know. Like, and it was like this, like, epiphany that the snowflakes were real. And I saw how beautiful it was, but it was just there for this moment, and it melted away quickly. And it was like, that's just like my baby, my snowflake. Like, they were here just long enough for me to recognize how precious they were, just to melt away. And so my first loss, I always call my snowflake, because it was this just realization of how precious and yet how fading, quickly fading they were in this realm, in this life.
That's really beautiful. I love that the Father gave you that kind of sign in your palm.
So I ended up writing a poem about the snowflake, and that was something that really helped me process and grieve, and have returned to many times over the years. So I think that's why I always encourage women to have some kind of outlet creatively, like that side of our brain, to recognize and honor, whether it be, naming them, or writing a poem, or writing a song, or making a painting, or like just the creative process of allowing my pain out that way really helped me in that process. And so I think that's why I often encourage it.
Yeah. You said that you felt like the presence of God in a really, like, I don't remember the exact words you used, but it was like a marked experience. And that was for me too. Ever since then, that's been my prayer for women when they tell me they're going through a loss, is may the presence of Jesus be especially near. Like, I really can think of very few times in my life when he felt as palpable. Like Jesus is with me right now, as with my first, which I just think is such kindness, and just shows me how much he cares. And even as I was praying before tonight, I was like, Lord, what do you want people to hear or know? And I felt like I heard him say, I want them to know that I remember. Because sometimes when you have a loss, you feel like you are the only one who does.
Yeah.
And that's not true. So yeah. Did anyone know about your loss besides you? I'm always curious too, to know about how like when we had ours, like we had a midwife that we had just barely hired, right? And so we had like one appointment with her. And when I reached out to her to tell her that I was bleeding, her response was so matter of fact that it came across as callous and uncaring.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And I just think about, that's really been, because that happened to me, though, it's really shaped the way that I want to respond to others when they tell me they're going through that, because that did not feel good. And on the one hand, you're like, I get it, because you've seen this happen so many times in your years in your work, and like, maybe you don't see life as beginning that early, and so it doesn't seem like that big of a deal to you. But she had just basically was like, oh yeah, it sounds like you're having a miscarriage. You could go over to the urgent care and have them confirm it. There was no softness. There was no like offer to come alongside. It was just, yep, that's what's going on. So that's what we did. We went to the urgent care or something. I don't remember. It's kind of blurry, as these things can be. And they did an ultrasound and said, yeah, there's no heartbeat, and you're 11 weeks today, but it looks like baby stopped growing at about 7. So it was a miscarriage. So I had been living with the belief that I was pregnant for about 5 weeks, with not actually being, which is also, was like so disillusioning. Like, we had very much started to dream into our future, and even buy baby things at the thrift store, like one does. And they said, well, you can stay here and we can do a D&C, or we can give you a drug to kickstart things, or you can just go home and wait and see what happens. I went home and waited to see what would happen. And I think it was even later that night that I started having contractions that felt, well, I now know, like a mini labor. I didn't know then what that felt like because I hadn't been through it. And my instinct was just to lock myself up in the bathroom and get in the bathtub. So I did that. And then at one point I felt like I had to get up and use the toilet. And that's when everything came through at once. My husband was home, but he was in the other room. It's interesting to see that, how even since earlier in marriage, I apparently like to birth alone in privacy. But I fished it all out in the toilet. I picked up everything I could and tried to look and see what I could see. It was this weird feeling of like my curious self that wants to understand and see and perceive and know things, that wanted to just examine, almost in this clinical curiosity kind of way. But then alongside that, like being a mother who just lost her baby and the grief and the sadness and the weight, and feeling almost like wrong for wanting to examine it, but also needing to examine it. Like I needed to see what I could see. We ended up
really normal response.
Yeah, I've since learned that it is, but it felt strange then,
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
Yeah, just even that, like feeling strange about it. I know it's actually something I really wish I had done. It happens so fast. Like sometimes I'm like, I've even gone, was I actually pregnant? Like, because it was so fast, so quick, just this like,
Yeah.
And I mean, I know that miscarriages can happen that way. And I, and I know it was, right. But there was just such a short time with this baby, and so fast for me, that even when I went to the restroom that morning, it was almost like I flushed out of just habitual instinct.
Yep.
And it was like my brain hadn't caught up to what was happening. And then it hit me, and it was like, I just flushed my child down the toilet, like, and then just this like guilt around that. And I've heard so many women experience that, of wishing they had scooped it out and wishing they had been able to examine their child's body, and not realizing that what they saw was such a very small child. Just thinking, okay, I'm bleeding. Oh, that was my baby. I didn't know, like that kind of level of just unaware, which is really kind of where my brain was. Like it didn't all click until it was pretty much too late to change what I had done,
Yep.
Yeah, it's totally normal for women to really, scoop that out and examine and to separate the placenta from baby, and do all sorts of, you can put the baby in water and really preserve and be able to spend some time processing. So
yeah. In my story, that baby was so little that I couldn't really discern. I didn't know very much about in utero, like fetal development then, so I didn't really know what I was looking for.
Yeah.
But I remember we just put everything in a little box and put it in the freezer. And then a few weeks later, when I was feeling physically better, we ventured out and to Arboretum near where we lived, which is probably completely illegal, but we just had a little burial service and like read some scripture and said some words, just the two of us, as a way of kind of like bringing closure, I guess, to that life and that experience. So
it's beautiful.
which I recommend. I think that was a good choice, for. And then I've always had a name in my heart that I've carried for her. I don't know why I think her, because it was too soon to say, but
wasn't too soon for her.
Yeah, so that was kind of our story. Your baby.
Well, does anybody else have a story they'd like to share, or even questions or comments, I know for my story, you're more than welcome to ask me.
I'll share mine.
Yeah.
I haven't actually really like, I don't know. I've shared it here and there with some people, and I think like bits and pieces. But yeah, Chris and I were just talking about it this morning. It was 2 years ago, and it feels just as fresh as my son's birth, and he's a year old, and so it's weird that like the memories are just as clear, even though they're a whole year apart. But anyways, so I had an early loss before my fourth baby, but it was like I found out I was pregnant, and then 2 days later I started bleeding, and I always take tests really early, so if I hadn't even taken a test I wouldn't have known. It was like, it still was hard. I cried and it was very emotional, but overall, like I healed rather quickly from it. I think, I also got pregnant the very next month. So, I went straight into pregnancy and carried my baby and anyways, so then I was pregnant with my sixth baby. So I guess seventh pregnancy, sixth baby. And, everything was fine. So I found out I was pregnant like right after COVID hit. And yeah, I remember like the day we found out was the day that I was at a protest in downtown Sacramento. So it's like, I don't know, it's just a weird memory. But anyways, so I was going through my first trimester. I felt like I do in all my first trimesters. And then all of a sudden my nausea went away a little early, which I didn't know exactly how far along I was. So I didn't think it was early, I guess. But I was actually using that like loss of nausea as a like way of kind of figuring out how far along I was. And then I remember telling my roommate at the time that I think I could feel a baby kick that day. And I was like, it's so crazy. Like I usually feel the babies pretty early, and doctors say that you can't feel a baby that early. And and then like 2 hours later, I was standing up and I just felt fluid coming out of me. And I was like, that's weird. I shouldn't be feeling that right now. And so I went to the bathroom, and I did not even, like, it was not on my radar that I would be bleeding, and it was blood. And so I was very shocked and just kind of like, okay, like what's happening? And I texted my midwife, and she said, as sad as as much as I hate to say this, it sounds like you're probably miscarrying. And so I immediately went into like research mode and like, what else could bleeding be? I've heard of women who bleed in their first trimester and they aren't miscarrying. And so I'm like holding on to hope that it's something else. And I was 11 weeks at the time, or 11 weeks for what I think I was. And then like my husband and I, we prayed, and we're just trying to like hold on to hope and not be like overrun with emotion, but just trying to like stay positive and see what happened. And the next day I just like took it easy, because if it was bleeding, we wanted to like, just regular bleeding, but still pregnancy, then wanted to take it easy and everything. And I was like, started having cramping. I was trying to like almost ignore that I was having cramps. And my midwife was saying, if you start cramping, then it probably is a miscarriage. And and so I tried to ignore it, and then we wanted to like, I just wanted to know. And I don't normally get ultrasounds in my pregnancy, but I really just wanted to know, like, is this a pregnancy? Like, is the baby alive, or am I having a miscarriage? And so my midwife was on probation. I think I've shared that story before, but so she couldn't like order up an ultrasound or anything. And so I kind of had it, was like, well, crap, like, where are we going to go? I can't just walk in somewhere. I didn't even know you could go get an ultrasound from an urgent care. But there's a birth center, and because I'm in the birth community, I have a lot of connections. So I just kind of started reaching out, and one of the midwives offered to meet us there at like 10 o'clock that night. to see if we could get an ultrasound. And she had only like learned how to do ultrasounds like a month before. So we show up and she starts looking and she's like, I don't see anything. Like, I don't even see a not alive baby. Like, I don't, like, there's a, like, your uterus is it's the size of a pregnant uterus, but there's nothing there. And I was like, she just doesn't know what she's talking about. Like, she doesn't know. And she's like, if you're as far along as you say you are, like, I should be able to see this. I just, saw a mom yesterday that was this far along. And I was just like, okay, your machine sucks and you don't know what you're talking about. And we'll just, but fortunately she could hire, could order me an ultrasound through like an ultrasound technician. And so we had an appointment the very next day. She got me in really fast, which was, middle of COVID, everything was like super locked down and crazy at this time still. And so we went in and I had to go in by myself because of COVID, and COVID made everything worse. And so I go in and I'm laying on the table and I told the lady like, because they don't usually let you watch, and I told her, I was like, I'm pretty sure that I've lost a baby, like I'm okay if I see it, like I want to see. And she was just like so adamant about me not looking, and so she's just taking pictures and at first I was gonna like really try to press to watch, but once she started actually like putting the wand on my uterus, it hurt so bad, like it was bizarre, and I was doing everything that I could to not like cry out in pain. And in fact, a few times I actually did, like just her touching me, it was so sensitive and so tender that I yelped. And she was like, are you okay? And I was like, it hurts, like what you're doing hurts. And she, she didn't even, and it's understandable because usually that doesn't hurt, like there's obviously something going on. And so she finishes and she walks out of the room and I sit up and I just gushed, like blood just rushed out of my body. And I'm like, and the whole time when we were even on our way there, it was like a 45-minute drive away from home. And I kept telling Chris, like, the one thing I don't want to happen is to lose the baby, not home, because just like what you were saying, Brooke, like I wanted to see the baby. I don't want to flush the baby down the toilet. And so it's like my worst nightmare was to be out in public. And then on top of that, to be in this ultrasound place and my husband's not with me and I'm freaking out. And so I just quickly like got up and ran to the bathroom. And it was kind of one of those things where like I went in a panic and everyone noticed, and I text Chris and he literally just barged through, like he wasn't wearing a mask. He just like walked in and was like, where's the bathroom? My wife's in there. And they like pointed and he just like walked in, and he just didn't care about it. And he's like my little hero. And anyways, yeah, I was like so like scared that I would have lost baby in the toilet. And so I like looked in the toilet and I pulled whatever I could out, and there was just blood clots. And then we left and went home, and we didn't even get the results of the ultrasound because obviously we knew what was happening, at least at that time. And so we went home, and I never had a water birth at that point. And so I was like, I want to have a water birth. Like I want to have this baby in the tub. And so I got in our big tub at our house, and it was weird because I'm actually not like I want to be around my husband in labor. I want to be around people in general. And this time I was very much like, no, I just want to be alone. And so he like set me all up in there and with candles and like a movie. And he just came and checked on me every once in a while. But I had texted the midwife who I'd seen the night before about it, and she warned me, I'm not a fan of this midwife. So she had warned me that to watch how much I'm bleeding because I could hemorrhage. She's like, it's very common to hemorrhage. And she's just very medically minded and like gives Pitocin like the second. I mean, I don't know if I've ever been at a birth where she doesn't give Pitocin, except for the last one because the mom like refused over and over and over, and she didn't. But and so having her say that, I was a little bit like don't say that to me. That's not gonna happen. And but it did stick with me. And so when I got home, I was just in the bathtub and bleeding, bleeding and gushing and gushing and gushing. And I had never, I don't know, it's like you don't really prepare for a miscarriage because you don't want to prepare for something that you don't want to happen, and you don't want to like fixate on that. And so I've never looked up what a miscarriage is like. And I, after the fact, I don't think that this was very normal, but I don't know, I just didn't think about it. And I didn't think about it even being like a birth. So I didn't think about, it's very important for me to be drinking lots of water, and it'd be very important for me to like, be filling my body as I'm literally losing blood. And I just didn't think about it. I didn't think about calling a doula, or I told my midwife, but I didn't, and she wasn't really answering me. And I don't know, I just didn't think about it. I was just like, I'm just gonna bleed like a period and it'll be over and that'll be it. And I was having no cramps except for those ones that I was having before the blood came. So like, I wasn't having contractions. I wasn't in pain. That was something that I knew to expect, but didn't have at all. Anyway, so I'm just in the tub and I am just bleeding so much. And every time a gush would come out, I would take it out and I put it in a bowl, because at some point, or at a certain point, the bathtub was just so dark red, which, knowing now what a hemorrhage looks like, I'm just like, I can't believe how like much I wasn't thinking. Like I did not have midwifery on at all. But it would get so dark, deep red that I couldn't see anything. So I'd empty the water and I'd fill it back up, and then I would put all the blood in a bowl and look at through each clump, trying to find the baby. And then a couple hours go by of me doing this. And I got up to use the bathroom, and while I was up, I got a little lightheaded, and I remembered what the midwife had said. And so I called Chris in and just, kind of told him to maybe just be near me since I was feeling lightheaded. And then we decided to call my midwife and talk to her. And my question to her was, if I'm losing too much blood, I'll know it, right? Like I'll feel it and I feel fine, right? So everything's great. And so I'm talking to her on the phone and she's like, yeah, and she's kind of giving me the answer. And as she's talking to me, I just felt all of the blood leave my face. And I was like, oh, it's happening. And I threw the phone over to Chris and passed out. And I just I was just out, and I woke up to like in this really crazy weird position inside the bathtub. Oh my God. I don't know what that sound was. Chris had pushed me down deep into the tub. It was empty. So that I wouldn't bleed as much, so I'd be laying down and not letting gravity work. And he had called 911. And so I woke up hearing him calling 911, talking to the ambulance and telling them our address and everything. And I hear my midwife on my phone somewhere, and she's like, what's happening? What's happening? Somebody tell me what's happening. And I can't talk. I'm still completely I was coming awake, but still entirely gone. And I wasn't able to speak or to tell anybody that I was there. I almost felt like I was not even in my body, I was separated from it. It was really weird. And anyways, so EMTs show up in my bathroom, and I'm completely naked, and put me on a stretcher and walk me past my children, and my kids have no idea what's going on. I'm not even sure if they knew I was miscarrying at this point. And so all of a sudden, naked moms going by on a bed and in an ambulance. And it was just kind of this crazy moment of I don't know what's happening. And I have no idea what's happening. And that was crazy. But the worst of all of it was then the hospital trip. So I'm bleeding in the ambulance, and the EMTs were amazing. They were fathers, and they were the Lord. It's grace in this whole situation. It was just very kind. But we get to the ER, and of course it's COVID, so everyone's wearing masks, and 4 people had come in before me that were more important than me. And so I got stuck in the hallway. Well, thankfully the EMTs, they wouldn't leave me, and they literally stayed by my side, and the EMT was constantly do you need something? Do you need a blanket? And I told him I'm sitting in a puddle of blood. Can you help me? I feel like I'm gonna start oozing onto the floor or something. And so he helped get, change my pad. And I was so scared that the baby was on that pad and was throwing it away, and all those thoughts. And anyways, they finally, because I'm a miscarriage, they put me in a private room, but then they left me. So the EMTs left, and I'm in a room naked with nothing. Like no one grabbed clothes or a phone, or like we weren't thinking anything like that. And so I'm in a room by myself with no call button on a bed, and I have to pee super bad because they put IV fluids in me, and I can't get up. I can't call anybody. They closed the door. I was so alone, and it was insane. And some guy ended up walking into my room, and he was trying to ignore me. He was trying to like refill the medical stuff, and I was like, can you help me go to the bathroom? And he was so awkward, and I felt bad for him. But anyways, so they do an ultrasound, and like I'm still bleeding, and the doctor comes in and tells me that I'm, yes, I'm having a miscarriage, as if I needed to know that. I think the thing that was shocking was that it didn't seem like they cared that I had passed out and that I was hemorrhaging. Like they treated me like a miscarriage, not like I came in because I was hemorrhaging. And so like they didn't, like I said, they didn't care that I was in there alone. And I'm like worried I'm going to pass out again, and I'm not going to be able to tell anybody what's going on. And I don't know, it was crazy. So he came in and he said it wouldn't really be worthwhile to do a D&C at that point because I was already miscarrying, which I was glad for. I didn't want. And he offered to give me medication to make it go faster, and I declined everything, and basically just sent me home. And like that was it. And so this nurse walks in, and she's like, okay, you're free to go. I was like, go where? Like, what do you mean go? I don't even have shoes. And she's like, well, the door's out this way. And she like points, and I'm like, oh, can you show me? Like, I don't know where to go. And so she's like, yeah, sure. So I get down off the bed, and she's like hustling, and I'm trying to keep up with her, and I'm like, I'm bleeding, and it's like dripping, and I'm like, this is insane. And we happened to go to the closest hospital because Chris and in the mix of all the emergency didn't pick like a good one. He was just like, just go to the quickest one, which was in the ghetto. And so there's like homeless people in the waiting room, craziness going on. And Chris had been pacing around outside. This was terrifying for him too, because he couldn't get a hold of me to know like if I'm alive. And so he happened to be like,
gown or anything. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. At this point, yes, I did have clothes.
Oh my God.
Yeah, but no shoes and no phone. Or I think I had my phone, so I told him I was coming out. But he didn't. He was like pacing around outside, and so he like was pacing past the wall, like I couldn't see him. So I walk out, and she's like, okay, there you go. And like there's just chaos going on outside. Like the cops are there, like arresting somebody, and I'm like, where's my husband? And thankfully, after like calling him, he realized, like I'm there. And anyways, so I go home, and kind of recovering from that whole thing. And then the next day I just became really anemic. So I was like really, really close to needing a blood transfusion, but not close enough that they would actually give me one, which ultimately I'm thankful for. But still, like, it still just boggles my brain now that I've learned as much as I have about it, like that they didn't give me any care. Like, tell me that I hemorrhaged, and tell me that, like, he just was like, yeah, you're having a miscarriage, go home and finish it, basically, and we can give you medication if you want, but nothing to help me. I mean, I don't know. It was just bizarre. And he wasn't an OB. He was just a ER doctor, and was really awkward about the fact that I'm, bleeding out of my vagina. Like, he was just super awkward. And anyway, so the next day I woke up, and Chris came to bring me food, and he hands me my plate, and I'm sitting in bed, and I put like my plate up on my knees, and I realized like I can't even lift my hand to pick up the fork to get the food to my mouth. Like, I'm so drained. Like it was just the weirdest like sensation, and I couldn't even call him to help me, because he like gave me my plate and walked out. And so I like waited for a few minutes for him to come back in, and I'm crying, and and then he of course is like, what's wrong? And he looks at me, and he's like, I've never seen, like, you looked like you were like the face of death. Like, I was so pale and just no life in me. And so then that freaked him out too, and we were debating about going back to the hospital again. But at that point I was terrified of the hospital. Like, I just sobbed and was like, please, 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 please don't make me go back there. Like, I'd rather just die. And and so we called the midwife at the birth center, and we called the birth center, sorry. The midwife that I had originally seen was gone in Florida. And so we saw a different midwife, and she, Chris, like carried me in, and she gave me 2 IV fluid, or we had gone in to get my blood drawn, because the doctor had told us that we should do that. And while we were there, she saw me and she gave me 2 IVs of fluid, and that like gave me life. Like I was able to walk out, and yeah, and then from that point on, it was 6 weeks of recovering from anemia from the hemorrhage, and I was in bed for a really long time, and then my dog died in the middle of all that, and so that was really traumatizing on top of it all. And like literally the day my dog died, it was like 3 or 4 days after the miscarriage, my dog died. And my dog died because we weren't paying attention to him being sick, so we didn't take care of him because I was miscarrying. So it's like he would have survived if it hadn't been for me. And like it was just in that moment, I had a really hard time not being angry with the Lord. I was like, what are you doing? Like 2020 sucks. This whole year sucks. Everything is horrible. This was the week after George Floyd had happened. And so the riots were going on, and that was insanity was happening, and like all of this. And then personally things started happening, with the miscarriage of my dog. And I was like, you hate me. Like you clearly hate me.
Yeah.
Which I know it was obviously not true. And I just like there was a moment where Chris came in and was with me. He'd been taking care of and he had COVID all through this. Like he actually had COVID this whole week. And so he was like pretending not to be exhausted, but he was. And he like comes in and lays on the bed with me. And I was listening to like some of my favorite worship songs. And it was It Is Well by Hillsong. And that song was really, really important to me in my last birth. And I was like, I couldn't sing it. I just couldn't like actually get those words out of my mouth because I was having a hard time like choosing to believe it. And I'm just like having this inner dialogue and inner struggle with the Lord. And like, it just all of a sudden just like broke free. And I like just sang so loudly, and Chris was beside me. He started singing, and then we like afterwards just prayed and like really, really cried. Like both of us just sobbed in each other's arms, and like finally, I guess just felt it all, because it was like everything was happening that we never really had a time to really feel the loss. And then also just the drama of everything, like the drama of it and the trauma from the hospital and all that was actually worse than the actual losing the baby. Like that was hard. Even losing my dog was really, really hard because I knew my dog. I didn't know the baby. And so it was like, and then I felt bad for that. Like I felt bad for feeling sad, that I was sad about my dog and not so much sad about the baby. Not that I wasn't sad, but not as sad. And it was just like so much, so much. So
Yeah.
anyway, I think the like biggest takeaway for me though that the Lord gave me in that was, I just remember this like moment, probably that same day, where I felt like there was like this pull, like this demonic pull to like go to the comfort of mourning. Like that's not right. Like not the comfort of mourning, but the comfort of depression. Like I could feel like there was like this deep pit that I could climb into if I wanted, and I would be comforted and it would feel good. And like even people who were well-meaning, just the things that they would say, and it was almost like I had all the right to be depressed. I had all the right to like be mad and angry and sad, and like to go ahead and just let my joy go and like fully give into this comfortable depression. And I just like, I don't know, like the Lord gave me a very clear picture of what it was, and it was just like this like big ditch covered in tar, where it was like, yeah, it's gonna feel good, but really ultimately like you have to give your soul to go in there, and it's so hard to get out of it. And I just like made a very conscious choice of like, I'm not going there. Like, and especially having that moment where the Lord gave me peace through that song and everything. It was like this hurts and it's hard, but like I feel closer to the Lord in the grief and the sadness, and I don't want to give away like my relationship with the Lord to have that, even though I'm like still kind of butthurt towards him a little bit. Like he is still good ultimately. And I know that if I walk away from that, like I'm only like agreeing to a lot of pain ultimately, and staying in that pain and not going towards healing and wholeness. And so anyways, that was a really
Wow.
cool picture, because I feel like I can now speak to that for other women who are going through that. And just like I know you want to go there, I know you want to be comforted in that way, but like that's not the right way. And yeah, anyways, so that's my story.
Wow.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
I'm so
Yeah.
sorry that you were treated that way.
Yeah, that I would love to like see. I just didn't even know that there were people that would even help. Like, it was so funny after the fact, talking, I was very public about that I had had a miscarriage and everything, and so many people were like, well, I'm a doula that would come and sit with you in a miscarriage. I'm like, yeah, I didn't even know. And how do you know? How do you find out about that
Yeah.
if you
Yeah.
it's such a hard thing to like, I love that people do that, but how do you get that word out that can happen, especially when so many people are secret when it's happening and don't come out and share until after the fact. And
Yeah.
And when you're in the thick of it, you're not necessarily thinking through your options on that kind of like logical, clear way of, oh, I remember this one girl posted on Instagram once that she's a miscarriage doula. Like, yeah.
It is something I offer and will always offer as a ministry. And largely it's like a friend of a friend, kind of like, she knows that it's happening. She's like, hey, message this person, because it's not something you plan for.
right.
So, and then like for me, I'm always thinking about like, well, then they don't call because they can't afford to pay for, like not something they budgeted.
Right.
I mean, budgeted my miscarriage real quick. Like that doesn't, and so then they're like, and I'm like, no, this is a gift. This is a ministry. You deserve to have someone come alongside of you.
Yeah. I think
Know,
it could have been completely different if I had just had somebody there, like letting me go through it, letting me feel it, letting me, like, even leaving me alone in that, but someone there supporting you, just like in birth.
right.
Yeah.
Somebody who's thinking like, here, please drink some water, and here's some chicken soup, and like, please make sure you're doing this, and probably shouldn't be in the bathtub that long, and whatever, like.
And oh, that bleeding looks a little bit too much to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the herbs that I could have taken, like, there's so much I could have done, and I just had no idea.
Yep.
Yeah.
Your story just illustrates so well, as does mine to a lesser extent, how much the way that those who are around us, from whom we seek help, how they respond to us, has so much power to either make it like a really like sacred, sad, but like gentle experience, or a one that like compounds trauma.
Right.
Yeah. I feel challenged by that as just a birth keeper and a friend, because I'm just like, it's also a thin place. Like I always talk about birth is a thin place, but miscarriages too. And so if somebody comes chomping into your thin space, being dismissive or like overly clinical, or not taking you seriously, or not thinking to cover your nakedness in an ER, it hits you even harder, I think, than it would if you were not in the middle of that process.
Yeah.
Like, because you're so open and tender, just like you are in birth.
But it's a birth. It's a birth.
It is. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
I think that, and I think Justine started kind of in that place of, I didn't know what I was going to experience. I didn't know it was going to be like birth. I think maybe even both of you said that in sharing your story. And just because this baby is not with us in body still does not make it not a birth.
Right.
It's a birth and a death simultaneously. But I think that recognizing that, and as hard as it is to say, I think actually prepares women a little bit better for the experience of like, there is a birth ahead of you. even though you won't have that living baby on the other end.
Oh, that was something else that had happened. So weeks later I had started, I never saw the baby, first of all. So I kept looking, never saw it, never saw anything like a placenta. And then weeks later, I had started bleeding again. And so I had gone back into I actually had to go back to the ER again because I developed a fever. And so we were worried that I was potentially like getting sepsis. And so we went in, and it turns out, so they did another ultrasound and all this stuff. And anyways, I won't make, this part isn't very interesting or anything, but I was going to have to go and get a D&C. That's what they wanted for me. And then the doctor had like looked at my chart and he was like, no, you really don't need this. Just take this medication. And anyways, I decided not to take it. And then I went back and saw another midwife at the birth center, and it was one from my community that I really loved. And she really like sat down with me and like let me share my whole story and just like talk about it from more of a like clinical standpoint, because I was still confused about things of like, why didn't I see the baby? And did the baby come out, and was it, lost in the Chuck's pads, and like, where is the baby? And so she's, she brought up the question, well, what happened with the ultrasound that I had gotten from the ultrasound technician? And so she actually ordered up the results from it, because we just, like I said, we never got the results. We just knew what was happening. She ordered it up and then called me back a couple of days later. And I guess it was I can't remember the name of it now. It basically, the baby was created and then dissolved, and my body just kept growing like I was pregnant, but there was no baby.
Oh yeah.
And so normally it doesn't go that long, but I had kept growing for, a whole trimester before my body finally was like, no. And so that was really hard for me. I think so. Someone said molar. I think that was really hard for me to kind of process then, because like this whole time I had been mourning the loss of, like, obviously, or we think that a baby had legitimately been created. That's why my body thought I was pregnant, but it had been dissolved so early on that it was like really weird in my brain, because this whole time I'm thinking like there's a baby, like,
Yeah.
Like it's already developed, and it's, I had a placenta, this whole thing. And then like, and it solved the mystery of why I never found it, but it was still really hard and weird for me to well, and then the biggest thing was, remember in the very beginning I had said like I just felt the baby move, and then to realize like there was not a baby for the vast majority, like the baby was probably gone by the time I found out I was pregnant. That was weird, really weird. That's what it was, a blighted ovum.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it was just trippy with my brain, and I had to like even Chris, I kind of cried for a day, and he was like, it was still a baby, like there was a baby, it just was a little smaller, or a lot smaller than you thought it was. But that was really weird.
That would be weird. Yeah.
Because I wanted to bury the baby. I wanted to have that moment of like, I don't know, just seeing them, and it was just blood.
Yeah.
Yeah, a blighted ovum is when you have the sac and a placenta, but the baby doesn't ever develop. So there's no like embryo, which would be why that makes sense with the first midwife that was learning ultrasound couldn't find.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that is hard and heavy. I'm so sorry that you had that experience, Justine, without the support of wise women and friend and comfort next to you. But I'm so thankful that the Lord, even in all of that he was present.
I mean, even that he preserved you, because you went to get help with your hemorrhage that they didn't even treat.
You said they did give you a IV, correct?
Yes.
They take blood or anything?
Say that again?
Did they take a blood to see your levels, or?
That was when he said that. Well, at that point he said, he said my levels were low, but they were still high enough that he didn't need a blood transfusion, which was still funny because he said that I was about halfway through. Like the ultrasound had showed that I was about halfway through and I still had a lot more blood to lose, but didn't, I don't know, just so go home and lose it. And I had asked, like, what happens if I pass out again? He's like, well, come back.
Oh my gosh.
So you can do this.
So they discharged you without being done bleeding while you had already passed out once.
Yeah.
That seems
It
idiotic.
even like take me out in a wheelchair. It was so bizarre. I don't know. In hindsight, I always feel this way. Every time we've gone to the hospital, I'm always like, I wish we didn't go. But it wasn't my choice at that point. No, my husband had no idea what was happening. And
Right.
Yeah.
But I would have rather just come to and stayed at home.
I mean, I'm sure the RV is why you were able to go home.
Yeah.
Being being revived that way, having that fluid pushed in, but like, I'm so mad for you.
It was, I've told a few people, like midwives and people in the birth world, and they're like, we need to change something in the hospitals. Like,
Yeah.
it's so bizarre that you would go to the ER and not like labor and delivery. Like, I don't get why you wouldn't just immediately transfer somebody, even if it's just for a couple of hours, just transfer them to the people who literally deal with this all day. Like, this is their job. This is what they do. They at least would have some more compassion and understanding. And yeah.
That's what they do at the ER here, actually.
Oh, really?
But yeah, they send you up to labor and delivery if you.
That's awesome.
Yeah, if you go in for a like obstetric related reason. But maybe not all hospitals have the same unit.
Yeah, not all
Like,
hospitals even have
site.
an obstetric unit.
This one did, but yeah, the second one we went to it because they were supposed to be better, and then they didn't have an OB unit, and that was what ended up causing more drama. But that's more just about the hospital than it is about miscarriage.
Yeah.
It definitely it changed my whole perspective of miscarriages, though. Like I then wanted to read other people's stories and figure out like what's normal and just all the things, and even like, what you do, Lauren. Like, it made me passionate that it hasn't come up. I haven't needed to help anybody since then, but I would absolutely in a heartbeat like go and help anybody just as like a ministry to walk them through that, because I just see so much how we as women really need to support each other through that situation. It's definitely not something I think people should go through alone. Like, it's given me a whole entire new perspective of things. Yeah. And then the other aspect, I think you even kind of had this on their little like spreadsheet thing. When I got pregnant with James, so then I was pregnant, I don't remember how many months later, but I had him a little over a year, like 2 months past a year after the miscarriage. So we were having an unassisted pregnancy and birth with my son. And so it honestly, like, I think for like the first 2 trimesters, it didn't even really occur to me like any fears. In the first trimester, there was that excitement of getting over that hump. And I did listen with a Doppler around like 10 weeks or so, because I just wanted to know that this baby was alive. Like, I'm going through first trimester again for a reason. And so like, I want to listen, I want to hear a heartbeat. And normally I don't like listening with the Doppler, but at that point I did. And then I didn't really have any fears about losing the baby after that. I was just kind of trucking along in my pregnancy, and it was somewhere in like the end of the second to the beginning of third trimester, where I think also hearing stories of women and all of the kind of crazy COVID things that were going on with women's births and being exposed to the vaccine and all whatnot could happen. And all of a sudden I did kind of think about like, well, I've never hemorrhaged before, but I hemorrhaged in this miscarriage. Like, what am I going to do if I hemorrhage at home and I don't have anyone there that has Pitocin? And there was an aspect of like, wow, like I am kind of scared of that. Like, I don't want to go through that again with the baby. And what do I do? And so it drove me into like I knew very basic things to do in the case of a hemorrhage. But it made me like, no, I really should look this up. Like, I really need to know this, and I should have these herbs on hand and know how to use them and know which ones to use when and all of that. And so I did, and I dealt with it. Like I sat with the Lord for like a couple of days and just like really made sure that like I surrendered that fear and didn't give into it and didn't let it affect me. And it was, I know that doesn't happen for everybody. Some people have to like daily have to walk through that. But for me, it was very like quick relatively to just like hand it over and then be confident in that, like, you know, my body has proven 5 times now that I can give birth to a healthy baby without hemorrhaging, and I'm going to keep all of my blood in and it's going to be fine. And then when I had James, ended up having a water birth with him. And when I got out of the tub after delivering the placenta, the water was entirely clear, and I had hardly any bleeding, like the perfect amount. And it was just, so it was like really, really cool to see that, you know, like, the hemorrhage was weird. And that was like, you know, this situation, but that's not my body. And I didn't have to deal with a hemorrhage, but I was prepared for it. So, yeah.
I love that you got that redemptive like experience. 'Cause sounds to me like obviously there's a trauma around the loss of baby and all of those things, but like of the the trauma that you really circled around was that hemorrhage.
Mm-hmm.
And the lack of support through it. Being able to have, you know, a healthy experience into your next birth is beautiful.
I just wanted to say to Justine, I really appreciate and just think it's really beautiful too how you shared your story and how you shared about your husband. Like that was just so powerful. I was just listening to Wapio's interview on the instinctive birth, the you know, the interviews, and you know, she's talking about partners and how they are involved in the birth process. And so it was just really like gorgeous to hear how fierce he was and like how, you know, you guys were like this. Like I'm getting emotional because it was just so beautiful, you know, how you shared that you guys were worshiping together and crying together. And, you know, nobody talks about, let alone us, the women, right? But nobody talks about the men. And, you know, you guys are like this, you're one. So it's really beautiful. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah. He's amazing.
I feel like when you're talking about the relational end of things, on my end, I feel like I've heard this before with other women too. It was the thing that was the breakdown when it comes to relationship stuff and marriage stuff. And so that was the case for me that I feel like is the one thing that's still like, that we're still like almost like in recovery from. Like it was a really huge shattering. I mean, not because of anything my husband did or didn't do, but it was really what the Lord was taking me through and all of that. Because for me, I've had 2 losses, both second trimester. And my first one was he died at 14 weeks. And so yeah, it was really the breaking open of a lifetime of shoving stuff. Really, like the Lord used this as a gateway, and I feel like I kind of knew that early on. The night I found out he didn't have a heartbeat, I was alone, and I hadn't felt movement in about a week, and from 12 weeks on, that child was like kicking every day. Like I could totally. So when the day he stopped moving, I like felt like I knew something was wrong. But then I thought maybe it's one of those, you know, it's early. It's hiding again or something. And but then a week of that and telling my husband we were traveling too, and my husband's like, everything's fine, it's fine. And then we were home and I was like, I got my Doppler out and was like, something's not, you know, I think I was ignoring it because I was like, there's no way I could even check. There's no way I could check. I didn't have the strength to check. But then a friend challenged me. She's like, well, wouldn't you need to know? And So I checked on by myself and there was no heartbeat. And so anyways, and later having a friend, their midwife who happened to be visiting, come over to verify also. And so in that place, that was one of my close friends that had come over that night. And I looked at her and I said, tell me what you see. Like, I was like spiritually, I felt like I knew this was like a gateway. Like whatever is here that I do not, is not, whatever. I'm trying to know how to word it. But anyways, it was really the gateway for me of opening just a lifetime of stuff that had been, and I had just written out this prayer, the first time I've ever written out a prayer in my entire life, just like not much long prior to this. And it was based on, I'd read Priscilla Schreier's Fervent, and which is an excellent book, and it's about prayer. Anyways, I wrote down my initial prayer that I wrote down. It was based on Ezekiel, 36:26, which is, give me a new heart, a new spirit, and replace my stony heart. And so I think I had a lifetime of coping, of just shoving stuff and putting another stony layer and shove it and put another stony layer. And so it was really just like this invitation, and ended up being a very long open-ended invitation, because in contrast to like all the suddens, which is so many different people's experiences, mine was the exact opposite. And week after week after week go by of carrying a child that I know is died and carrying death for weeks on end. It really was, if I would have known ahead of time, I probably would not have had the strength to do it by far. But it was literally like the Lord was asking me to go step by step with him on this one. And I felt like I kind of didn't have I did have a choice, but it all felt like this is, I have to go through this, whatever this is. And I knew, I don't know how I knew, but I knew it wasn't something that I was going to like make happen or end. And I don't think that necessarily I would just attribute that it's always should be a woman's experience, because I think everybody's in different places for what they're needing, what the Lord's taking them through, all that kind of stuff. But in my particular situation, it was, when things align, this baby's going to come. So, mentally, emotionally, physically, like there's an alignment that has to happen. And could I have the strength enough to wait for that alignment? And no, I don't think I did. But that's something that the Lord cultivated and gave in that whole process. So for mine was a really, really long journey, and ended up being 6 weeks till he was born. So it was a really, really long time, but it was for me like just a huge emotional rending, really, of being able to be okay, I think, within a lifetime of performance. I think like the thing that surprised me the most about that loss in the midst of it and afterwards was the immense amount of shame I felt, even though I technically didn't do anything wrong. It was just like, I think there was just such a sense of failure attached to it. And I think that, for other things for myself to dig into, but that failure, or I really had a hard time saying I had a miscarriage, like to actually put that in a black and white thing, like was gutting me. I don't know. It was just when my mom, but it's something I grew up with, like hearing all the time. My mom had 10 miscarriages. Like I was the oldest of 6. They all were all early. The only time she ever had seen even a small tiny baby or anything was I think it was like a 10-week one. And there was only once where that happened, but then she took it in somewhere, and then they just took it from her and never gave it back. And anyways, and so she would have dreams about this baby crying she couldn't get to, and horrible things like that. So anyways, just off so anyways, I realized even in all these different things how much the path I had to walk was hard, but the Lord really gave me the presentness to be able to have it as my own and not have to make because if there's so many stories, all be gracious goodness, the trauma associated with these hospital visits and too is so, I'm definitely don't want to not go in somewhere we need help, but man, we got to shift some things so we're not adding trauma on top of trauma. So anyways, I'm not sure where I'm going with that, but I think I was just coming in on the relational end of what, and yeah, like what Justine was saying about that place of not letting yourself go to a place of the mire of depression. but also for me, it was like, you have to be real with where you're at. And there was such pain inside me, probably not just from, I mean, like, I don't know, I felt like I had generations worth of pain inside me that I was letting out. Like, I'd have to go in and like scream into a pillow. Like, I felt like I almost was like emotionally laboring and spiritually laboring for those 6 weeks. And I look back and like, I think, you know, how could I have gone 6 weeks? And it was intense. It was long. It was an intense journey. And but I know that I literally needed every one of those days to become the person that could give birth to him.
Yeah.
Like, it really was. It was really that like deliberate of a thing. And really, and how much I've learned in that process of releasing, of letting go, and how hard that really was. But knowing, even when I was in the tub, and my husband brought him, so I was like all of a sudden in labor, and all of a sudden after all this time, but like, it was still like really intense. I mean, I have fast labors usually anyways, but this song that come on, we put a like Pandora thing on, and I had like a playlist, something, but of course he didn't do it. And I was like, that's not my list, that's not my thing, but you know, whatever, something's playing. Of course, Lord has the right things play anyways, but it was really just this letting go thing. And I knew, like, when he had come out, so I mean, we're talking a baby the size of, you know, he was the full size of my hand stretched out. So from his head to the bottoms of his feet, that's how big he was. So he died at 14 and I gave birth at 20. But I was on my knees and like, and just, and when he came out, it was everything that came out, but it couldn't come out all the way. And I knew it was a placenta that was still attached. And I knew like there was this other element of release and letting go that I had to do. And I was on my knees in this tub, and like the song on is like, you know, we pour out our praise, you know, with their breath in our lungs, we pour out our praise. And so I'm on my knees, like going over like this 6 weeks of the most intense journey. And but I knew it was about this. And then of course, when you said about the "it as well" thing, so the first bars of that come on, I knew like the baby's being born, you know, to that, which actually that song came first, but that is the song that the baby was mostly born to, is the "it as well." And let go my soul and trust in him. When, you know, like first bar, I knew the baby was going to be born, that song. And then the baby was born, but then not all the way. And then the next, the Greater You Lord song comes on, and you know, pour out your praise. And then what's really stuck. So I'm the woohoo artsy one, right? But my husband's like super opposite of me, and he's in there with me. And he remarks how powerful this was is when we brought this baby up out of the water, because I finally, like, you know, just feel like I really like released, let go, was praising him on my knees. And I hear a pop and everything comes out. So him, the sac, all the placenta, everything comes out all at once. And I'm bringing him out of the water as the bridge is playing for that song. And, you know, our hearts will cry, these bones will sing, Greater You, Lord. And anyways, that's marked on us, my husband too. He's like, that was just wild. This line of this song is playing. You're, you know, bringing this baby up from the water. And so it was a really intense journey. And I also was very like in a kind of half almost clinical mindset. Like I wanted to see her. Like my husband was like, well, it's like, you know, almost like, okay, we need to be done. Let's not open this. Let's not, you know, because it was all intact, you know, the water was dark and that kind of stuff. But of course I'm like, you know, I want to see everything. And a friend of mine lost a baby about the same gestation just after me. I didn't find out till afterwards, but her husband was also like, can't deal. I got to get rid, you know, and so like that night they like went out and buried the baby. And she was so traumatized from like the rush, and she almost like clawed, like days later was like, want to go and like dig up the baby. And it was just, so anyways, just like this rush of like, I don't know what to do with any of these things, but I just like knew like I have to fully see this through and see everything and show it to my children. And so just to have the safety and place to do all that in my own home was really good. And I had several unassisted free births prior to that. And that was that as well. But just bringing out the relational, and like for me, it almost like the Lord was using it as a time for, there was almost like a severing with me and my husband. And we had been so tight, so tight our entire, you know, marriage. And so, but I think I was getting all my validation from him, all these other things. The Lord was really just separating these things, like who are you and me? What are you when you, it's just you and me? And that was really, so I was like a rending of like, I just lost a child. I felt like I almost like lost my husband, like he's there, obviously never left me, but that emotional end of all the things and dealing with all the internal stuff. So I feel like it's never about a linear journey about like this plus this plus this, but these things that I realized I've learned in some of that with the release thing. I mean, there have been multiple women I've talked to afterwards, and I said, like, really processing the release of it, because hemorrhage is very common in a lot of situations. And I feel like it's not necessarily because it's just like inherent with a miscarriage. Like miscarriage equals like lots of bleeding and hemorrhage. But I think there is just so much of an emotional end of this, of that release and letting go, that if unprocessed, not that you did something wrong if you hemorrhaged, but there is a tie there. I feel like there's totally a tie there that I had to do a lot of processing through myself. I feel like to get to that point, I've had other women say that, that had like second trimester, really late losses. And I kind of was walking with one woman through that. And she also felt like I had to really process that release aspect that was on her mind before she could deliver that placenta. And that's usually where things can get hung up. And one mom that was similar to me, you know, they were like clawing, the baby had kind of come half out like mine, like couldn't come out all the way. And, you know, are clawing it out in the course pieces and, you know, all that kind of stuff. So it's just that release element and emotional element, I feel like, of things coming into alignment, that I feel like is, I mean, the Lord was really gracious to me, and how I didn't necessarily have a lot of different people walking really with me too much, like super close, but how we really need that, like that emotional end of walking through something is so hinged on what that birth experience is going to be, how much trauma that woman's going to carry later. Like, so even though that was really intense, I felt like I had a lot of things, and I had a lot of processing to do after that fact. Like it was months of a lot of intense processing that as well. But I got that full, I felt like I did get closure and finality, and, you know, from that. I had another loss soon after that, actually, that wasn't as tidy. So I kind of had these two experiences, but how, like you said, like that, what's the sacredness? How do you make it like bring things full circle? How do you make it so it mattered? Because everybody else goes back to normal. Everybody else goes back to normal.
Yeah.
And you don't know how to. Like there is no more normal anymore. Like your baby's in the ground. Like what do you know, there's no more normal. So those kind of things, and being able to walk and be real. Because yeah, like you don't know, like Brooke said, you don't know you're joining this giant club. This huge club that you didn't know exist. And just being able to walk alongside people, not necessarily save them from any particular thing, but just like, walk with them. Because it's just don't prescribe to know exactly what that journey is going to look like for any woman. And I think that's a sensitivity to spirit as to what that looks like and how to walk it. And so.
I'm curious, what did it look like for you in those 6 weeks physically? That's so hard to imagine that.
Yeah.
Like, does your body know that you, like, was your body still acting pregnant?
I wasn't. I mean, I definitely started getting smaller after a while. I feel like I, wasn't like producing amount of fluid. My second loss was actually, my next pregnancy was twins. And then the one twin died at 20 weeks, and I didn't give birth at 26. So it was also 6 weeks again.
Yeah.
So in that time, again, kind of got, with that pregnancy, I definitely got a lot more fluidy. Like all of a sudden, like there's way too much fluid. Something's not, like my body's trying to overcompensate for something. But then, with my first one, I definitely got smaller physically. I had never had any bleeding. Maren Green was the only other person I'd ever known that had really long, because you don't hear, because this is not heard of on, like, at least there's probably more stuff out there now. Okay,
right.
This is now getting, it's 5.5 years ago now, actually. Okay. So I could find hardly nothing. Nobody carries a baby for a week or 2 or 6. Like nobody.
No, you go in for a D&C at a certain point, and the doctors are like begging you and telling you you're going to die if you don't.
Right.
Yeah. So
Maren did 4 months.
Yeah, Maren did 4 months. So, and that was just prior to mine. So Sage was just prior to me. So that was actually really helpful. Just a couple of days before I gave birth, Maren sent me pictures of Sage and what it looked like for her. Like, so that
Was it
way.
Sable? I thought it
Oh,
was Sable.
I'm sorry, Sable. I'll say it's not Sage, right? Sable. Yeah, sent me pictures of him. And so that way I was kind of a little more prepared on that. Although my experience, my baby was a little bit different. Like my baby hadn't like, there was no like dissolving or anything like that. Like it was, and actually we like, the one hack that I really love that I knew about, I'm not sure how I knew, but like rehydrating a little bit. And
Right.
because also his skin was stained from like the dark water.
Yeah.
So being able to like rehydrate him in like saline. So I just got like those big bottles of eye wash or whatever. And so that like rehydrated him perfectly. So he was just like, and it took the stain out of his skin. So it really made him. So I feel like that's the other thing. I'm a photographer. So
Yeah.
feeling like you need like pictures of this thing. And it's, and our babies are beautiful no matter what state, what they
Yeah.
look like, right? Like, but I feel like there's that element of like, just wanting, I want to see what it like really looks like what it should look like before death stained this,
Yeah.
And so even those things, like I feel like I wish that there was that element of birth keepers that are walking alongside women, like know these different things, like, and because again, I didn't know what I needed when losing a child, and I didn't know and I still leave in like, I didn't know that I needed that, or I should have done that, and I had a friend end up giving me a little bunting, like, so I gave birth to this baby. And I was really walking this time, like that whole 6 weeks, like, Lord, what are you wanting me to do? Is this like this baby going to resurrect? Like, what's happening? Like, I'm open. Like, what are we doing? And so, anyways, it was really hard. So it was like that last week was like the letting go, and when he said to let go, and but so I didn't have pads, I didn't have it, so I had like people dropping stuff, because I was like, it was just I wasn't preparing in that way or anything. I wasn't sure. Once it goes so long, you're like, it's kind of like the end of like a really long pregnancy. You're like, am I gonna be pregnant forever?
Yeah.
Like, this becomes part of your reality or whatever. A little bit different with this, but yeah, but somebody had brought this like little woolen baby bunting. Like, that's just this sweet little baby bunting she made. So like I could put him in that, because for some reason it just felt so wrong to go and like bury my baby like naked in a cold box.
Yeah.
Like just those things like that. Like, it just, those little things to make these things that are sacred and special are really just huge. I would be a little great if there was like some online resource, I'm not, maybe there isn't, I just don't know of it, like has that kind of stuff, that has like whatever, the how-tos or ideas or whatever. And I'm sure if like, yeah, you just don't know until you need it. And then you don't have time to think about it. And so somebody else has to like think about it for you, quite literally, So I didn't get like hand or footprints with him. I wasn't in that mindset to do that either. And I wish I would have done that. But anyways, physically, I had no bleeding that entire time. I definitely had some intense contraction-y things that final week. But they're kind of off and on. And then my labor hit like a, freight train. And then he was born in like, I don't know, it was under an hour, I'm pretty sure. So it was pretty fast and hard. But yeah, so that's physically, you said. Sorry, I got distracted.
All good information. Thank you for sharing.
So I guess in listening to all these stories, you see such a gamut of difference of, how, it can take as long as, 4 months to release that baby, or it can be so quick that you don't even have a chance to catch your breath before all of baby has been birthed. And so it's and everywhere in between. And so I feel like it's just like the rest of birthing, like no two stories are the same. And I guess it leaves me with like, how can we best support women in this very like unexpected, hard place that we don't really have words for? Like, it always bothers me that we do not have a word for the loss of a child. We have the word for loss of a spouse, that you become a widow, and you have a word that for the loss of parents that you become an orphan, but we don't have a word for the parent that loses a child. And I've often just said, like, I guess it's because it just leaves you without words. it's just such a deep, hard loss. And I always just take hope that death has no sting, and they are eternal beings, and we will get to meet them. And right now that they've never known anything but love. They only knew the first parts of us waiting for them, and then right into Jesus's hands. And so that's where I take my hope, at least for the two that I lost. I didn't share. I also had a twin loss, Heather. So mine was a vanishing twin, also a quick thing. I guess my body doesn't, I don't know, it does it very quickly. And I've actually kind of envied the getting the long time to process and hold. And with Levi, we had twins, Leela and Levi, with my last pregnancy, and he was a vanishing twin. And so there was always this, like, I guess I'm still holding him. He just reabsorbed. And I didn't get to have any like physical indicator of him. And that's always been really hard. But I always just like, it was also the 2020 year of grief and death and chaos and all of the craziness. And especially for me that year, it was, I lost my grandmother, and then I served a woman who we were preparing for stillbirth, the baby who had a heart defect. And then I found out I was pregnant with twins, and then I lost my dog, and then I lost the baby. And then I walked through two women that I was very close with in friendship, and from a midwifery role through their miscarriages. And then I had at the end of the year, lost a dear friend, and attended another birth where it was a uterine rupture, and we lost a baby. And it was just so many babies. And so in between all the babies, there was all this other death. And then in the midst of the year 2020, it was just this really grief-stricken year. And through all of it, I just kept saying, I am grateful and I am grieving, and I am grateful and I am grieving. And that is my twins. I'm carrying gratefulness and I am carrying grief. And I would not, I didn't want to push away the grief. I wanted to grieve well and, really recognize it as a holy thing, as a sackcloth and ashes, as a evidence of love. That while I was so very thankful that I had this alive child, I was also very grief stricken from the loss of Levi, as well as the loss of all of these other sweet babies that had crossed my path that year. So it was that year that I really learned that our God is a God of and. It's not just, you have to be sad. You have to, you have to grieve, or you can be grateful. Like, you have to pick which way you're going to be. For me, it was like, I need to process. I need to feel these emotions and recognize and know that I loved this child and love this child, but I also don't have to be sucked into that mire. I don't have to be sucked into the depression. I can be held in gratefulness and that grief. So I guess I just hope that those lessons are something that can be a legacy, that like, that's the legacy Levi gave me, to teach me. And I just keep trying to pass that on for him.
I feel like that grateful grieving thing is really, I love the beauty of that, especially even with the twins and having like that, having those both worlds. And similar with me as well. But also just in the aspect of when we're walking alongside other women, I feel like what was really frustrating to me as having walked through that was that I couldn't be fine at a certain point. I couldn't just be healed, be done processing. Because I think it was very frustrating to my husband. It was frustrating to other people. Like, Heather could just, especially my new self that was now so in touch with my emotions, like all of a sudden that basically just meant I was like a mess out of nowhere frequently. So yeah, so it was great to be able to be a little more present in my emotions. But it was a wild ride. Like I looked crazy. I mean, I'm sure my husband thought I was nuts. Like, she's going down this path. I'm gonna have to medicate her at some point. Like, this is not going well, but it really was it was a messy, raw, and that's what, and I've never shared my mess. I've always been somebody, like, I'm more of like an Enneagram 3, like wing 2, like I'll go through something horrible. I will tell you then at the end of this amazing, beautiful story about it. And then, how whatever, some inspiring something or other. I'm not going to show you me like completely a mess in the middle of it. And so, yeah, I've been doing that for like, I feel like all these different situations the Lord's put me in the past 8 years have been very much that, just a humbling experience of like, you're going to have to be raw and messy and not be okay. So, and that's just going to be the way it is. And so we can get comfortable with this. So, just another path of those, just the emotional end of all these things. But I like that you said about grateful and grieving, because I feel like that can be a very long, ongoing process. Of just that, the grief still is there when the person isn't sitting at your table. And and you're grateful for all those that are sitting at your table. But that is still there. And I think I've had that the most with Ever is the twin that we lost, and Everly B, and it was a name that Lord gave me a couple years prior to having her. It means the other side of my heart. And so actually never knew the meaning of the name would play into a twin scenario, but yeah, to have the other side of her like sitting at my table and her not, it's just it's just such a real thing. So I think, I won't say it's cool, but it's neat that I can get that piece that we share of being able to have, one of our twins here, and the gratefulness and the miracle of it, really.
The sunrise and sunset
That's
twin.
amazing. I did not know about that. I'd never heard that. I think that's amazing. I love that.
I don't remember who told me that, but shared that with me, and it was definitely something I was like, oh yes, that's because it was like, she's not a rainbow baby, she's like, there's this other, and it's like, oh well, she's not, because it's sunrise and sunset. But I feel that with like every milestone she hits, or these just moments that it's like, oh wow, I should be holding 2, like I could, what would it be like to hold 2 right now, or me nursing 2 right now? Or not too long ago I was visiting a very small church, and it's just a bunch of little kids running around, and service wasn't started yet, and so everybody was just kind of communing, right? They were just chatting, and kids are running around at your feet, and there's this little boy that is like blonde haired, just exactly the same height as her, and they were just playing together and running, and I just was like, it took everything in me not to just start sobbing, because it was like, oh, that's what it would have looked like. That's what, and she was like chasing him around, and he was kind of like, I don't know who you are. Like, what are you doing? And so he was kind of like, I don't know. It was just this cute little, she was just like, you're going to love me, chasing him around. And he was like, I don't know who you are. And it was just the cutest thing. But it was just so heart-wrenching. And then to top it off, his name was not Levi, but there was another child's name, Levi, in the room. And so I kept hearing the mom saying, Levi, over this, and so I'm just like, okay, God, what are you doing to my heart? Like, but it was just this, okay, I don't know. I always shared I wish I could remember the writer who wrote the grief model. I think it's Lewis with a T at the last name starts with a T. But he, is that we grow with our grief, and like, we keep thinking that grief is going to just like disappear. It heals with time. As we get forward and get further away, it's gonna, just dissipate. And it's just not true. That's not what happens at all. You like carry it, and it's still the same it's still the same size. It still is there. We just happen to, like, our life grows around that and we get bigger. The container gets bigger. So you kind of get further away from being triggered, that grief being triggered, but it still hits like a wave. And I think that that's the thing that, especially with early loss, that we don't talk about as much. That you have all of these dreams and all of these thoughts of what they would have looked like and what they would have been like and what their personality was, and and who are they, and we just have to fill in those gaps with our imagination. And I think that it almost makes it feel like we've pretended, like it's just all, we just made this up, like it just, and but they are real, and they are your child, and it's okay to miss them, even though you didn't get to see their face or didn't get to meet their personality and hear their voice and see their first steps and all those things. Like, it doesn't make them not real. And it makes it okay to grieve them.
Yeah, that one thing I think I resent about miscarriage is the way that it kind of prevents you from ever having the seemingly smooth, naive experience of pregnancy that other women seem to be allowed to have, like they just coast through with just expectation. Like, obviously I'm gonna have a baby 9 months from when I got this positive test. And I have found that hard at points to witness that like naive joy in like, but it's like, you never want to squash that with them, obviously. If you're not gonna say, well, you could still have a miscarriage, but it just like takes the innocence kind of, right? Like, and you just, it's that you wrestle through it every time you're pregnant again. Like, what if there's a repeat? And learning how to like manage that fear and take it to the Lord and not let it get the better of us, I find to be like an ongoing work. It's not like well, I've settled that once and for all. Like, it was like a daily practice sometimes to not let that fear consume your imagination or drive your decision making even. Yeah, I see you there. Like, I just relate to that part of your story, especially of the lasting impact.
It's made it so hard to prepare. Like with Badrick's pregnancy, I was 20 weeks pregnant when I was like, oh my gosh, I only have 4 months left or so. I should probably prepare for this birth. Like, I'm going to have another home birth. But it's been 7 years since my body has birthed a baby. And I started to kind of have that freak out moment that I had lost so much time because I was so consumed with so much anxiety. And
I like, Brooke, what you said when I first came on, or when I first came in, and not when I first came on. You said something about that God said, you felt like he said that he remembers them, right? And I was like, oh, that's so powerful, because yeah, it needs to be remembered. And I love that we have spaces like this where we can share these stories and help each other, because I guess like in this space, we're learning how to support other women through these losses too. And I have a really close friend who had a really hard miscarriage last year, and I want to say it was a long one. It was a long one. Like, she finally ended up having the actual miscarriage at like 18 weeks. And it was a long, drawn out miscarriage. I think some of that was mental. A lot of it was mental. She was doing a lot of looking into and asking a lot of questions. And I, as much as I tried to ask her to like, hey, can you just relax into this and know that your body knows what it's doing? And she's like, no, I need all the answers. And she didn't end up having a DNC, but she did end up having pieces. Like, it happened in chunks, and So there was like, well, we don't know if everything came out. We need to check you. And then they were trying to convince her still to do a DNC. And she was like, no, I'm not doing a DNC, which I'm grateful for. But there's all kinds of just things. And I think a lot of it was just her not wanting to let it go. And fighting against it with trying to have knowledge around it. Just from the outside looking in. But she's like one of my heroes, because while she was going through it, and even today, she's pregnant now again with her now rainbow baby, but she posted throughout her loss. Like once she was ready, she started sharing about loss and pregnancy loss and all this stuff, and like asking questions like, how did you feel? Were there things on your bucket list that you decided that as soon as you were okay, you were gonna do? Like, what did you do when the birth date came around, like your estimated due date? Like, she's been really being a voice for people to share and come out and share their stories. So I'm really grateful for, I'm kind of grateful for her experience, just because she's made it possible for others to come forward and share. And she said, she said, I'll never understand how many people came to her in Messenger and shared their stories. And so it's been an interesting walk. But I'm blessed, ladies, to be in this space and have all of you share your stories, and shed tears in communion, because it is. It's a lonely place when you're in it. And it's good to know that you have women to come alongside.
Well, thank you all for the sacred sharing of your stories. Yeah, it's really important that we can say these things out loud to people that we can trust to hear us gently. So I appreciate you giving that to me, and I like really honored to hear your stories. Oh, there's probably more. I feel like we could probably talk a lot longer about this, because some of us have even more than one lost story.
Yeah.
But I think given the time, we'll probably wrap up for tonight. I don't know. Does somebody want to pray us out? Just like kind of a little closing blessing or prayer?
I can.
Thank you.
Dear Heavenly Father, I thank you for this space. I thank you for all the hearts that are represented here that have been open to receive and witness stories and emotions and things locked away that maybe don't get told just everybody. Thank you, Father, for just the for a comfortable place that knows it's sacred to be able to share this thing. I pray that there would be, we come away from this time, that there would be an increased sensitivity towards that need in other women, that there would be just an awareness, a heightened awareness, a sensitivity to your spirit's nudge on these things. If there's, even if it is somebody in the checkout somewhere, you know, that there's so many. I think it even just all the length of this talk, like this is one of those things that just takes up volumes. It takes up so much space because it needs the space to be able to be processed and told and heard and shared. And so Father, just show us what, help us walk in wisdom as how to walk with one another, and being able to that each of these experiences have grown us into the person that you created us to be, that each of these little lives that haven't, that were not on earth that long, that they've each impacted things in a monumental way for the kingdom. I feel like that was one of my biggest takeaways, that these lives are not accidental, and their impact on us is what impacts the world. So Father, I just pray that we be able to carry the legacy of these children and their impact on our lives into the world and into your plan, that they don't need to be, they shouldn't be swept off to the side, because there's no insignificant person. So thank you, Father, for our people, the ones we get to hug on, the ones that the ones we don't, and the faces we never got to kiss. That, Father, you would just be able to fill the places that still ache. That there would be just a comfort and a tenderness there, and a nearness, to reach some of these places that might even be more open just because of sharing. That there would just be also just an increased tenderness, and nearness towards all the women that shared tonight. Thank you so much for your gift of mercy, of faithfulness, of walking alongside us through all this.
Mhm.
In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Before we sign off, I just feel that unction. Both Justine and Heather mentioned this song earlier on. It is well with my soul, being part of their stories. And if you know the history of that song, it was written in the wake of loss of children.
Oh,
And
I didn't know that either.
yeah, I actually was talking about it earlier with Molly, and then went to look up the story. And so I would encourage you all to listen to find the history of that story. But basically, it was written by a father who they had lost a son 2 years prior, and then to scarlet fever, and then his wife and his 4 daughters on a ship to England in the 1800s. And there was a shipwreck, and he lost all 4 daughters, and she sent by telegram, saved alone, what shall I do? And he set sail
Wow.
to England to meet his wife. And at the place that the shipwreck happened and his daughters had died, he wrote that song. And I just wanted to read just from that song to end us on. It says, when peace like a river attendeth my way, when sorrows like sea billows roll, whatever my lot, thou hast taught me to know, it is well with my soul.
Thank you so much for tuning in to this week's episode of Holy Wild Birth. We hope that you were genuinely encouraged, inspired, and challenged by what you heard today. If you're loving what you hear, please make sure that you share it. Leave reviews. That helps other mamas find this content as well. And don't forget to read the show notes, okay? Because that's where you can find our email address if you want to reach out to us and start a conversation. It's also where you'll find free offerings as well as invitations to work with me and or Lauren. We can't wait to get to know you. See you next week.